Welcome everyone to another episode of Price Targets with your host Bitcoin Jack. Welcome. It's Wednesday, and we're gonna be I don't know, we're gonna have a look at Bitcoin, but it's kind of going towards what I think is being on the verge of a breakout here, and ETH at the same time remains kind of stuck in, no man's land. It had a little bit of a reaction here. It's getting rejected as Bitcoin is showing strength. And I think for Bitcoin, a lot of things I mentioned in the last couple of videos remain very true. We're going to dive into it. We're going to kind of repeat a few things I said in previous videos. And it's going to be pretty straightforward. I want to have your attention first for Ecos. They're sponsoring this content, so I want to give them a big shout out and thank you for that. And please go check out the link in the description below. They're a regulatory compliant exchange and they are growing, expanding. It is, I think, a place where in the future we're gonna see a lot of innovation coming from. They're launching an exchange token, which is a very different approach from most exchange tokens. So that's also very exciting. I'm looking forward to how the mechanics and the tokenomics will actually work out. Yeah, thank you, Ecos. Bitcoin, guys, girls, are we bullish? Are we bearish? I think, as we discussed last week, we've pretty much, I wasn't convinced to either side, but I was positioned long and just hoping for this region to be gained. And then obviously there was this red line here that should have been a resistance if we were bearish. And now we're kind of getting into being on the verge of a breakout. It is possible that we're kind of doing a retest as we did right here and then come back down all the way here. But I don't think, considering the macro, that's the case right now. I think a lot of people are watching all these kind of fractals and seeing some kind of potential for a breakdown. Personally, we've retraced so much of this move down that it's going to become unlikely for this to see any rejection. And it's also not a place to go long. It's resistance. If you didn't take the bet as we break out of this structure here, or you didn't take the bet as, either we swipe this low right here or this line right here, it is tricky to get long here, in my opinion. But if you're long, this is the place where you start just, let it run. In my opinion, we're bearish if price can break back below here. In that case, it's definitely going to retest this trend line down, potentially run at least a wick down here. But I think all of that is just me trying to make you aware of the fact that, it's always good to remain cautious and do not expect any guarantees in trading, yada, 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 yada. But I think we're going to be bouncing straight, like within the next 12 hours, straight to this line, and then start a couple of days of consolidation around it. So 61, 62, 63, maybe kind of retest back down all the way to this red line, maybe only come down here, and then see continuation into 69, 73. And then some consolidation right there. So bottom line of what I'm expecting, and I'd love to see, obviously I'm biased because of my position, but so once more on the low time frames, in my opinion, bearish below here. If we get a retest here, it would surprise me, but it's possible, absolutely. But I think that this breakout is not going to retest itself. It would be too nice to give people who've been bearish another opportunity to load up. So essentially, if we kind of break down here, I'm going to be cautious. If we're down here, very cautious. For now, I'm holding long, and I do expect that. So we have this little structure right here that is causing the trouble right now. But if we look at the volume traded in this last kind of like, consolidation before this breakdown, there's absolutely none. And look at the low volume here. So what we're seeing right now, compared to the consolidation earlier, between like the end of Feb and kind of 2 days ago, is volume started to drop, and it's kind of showing up right now, kind of growing. So in that scenario, my biggest expectation right now is that we flip this and we kind of shoot towards the 61, 62, 63, 64 range, consolidate a little bit, probably retest the thing, and then after a couple of days continue to this little range right there. And we're probably going to get stuck at this diagonal trend line, trend zone, whatever you want to call it. It's been pretty important throughout the rally. Let's say, like even if you want to count this since, late November, and we can find confluence with that line. We draw a trend line from this high in January, early Jan, and then this high in Feb. It runs into this diagonal trend line right here around the same time. So there's going to be a little bit of a diagonal and horizontal resistance around these levels. And that's, I'm probably jumping the gun far too much into the future. If this doesn't like come down all the way here, let me draw another trend line. This doesn't come all the way down here, which, I wouldn't like to see. But instead, after some consolidation here, manages to flip it. That's... Sorry. I'm going to redraw it. Bump. Okay. So, let's say it doesn't come down here, but manages to hold this structure, for example, or maybe doesn't even retest the structure, and consolidates around this area, around this trend line a little bit, and then claims it. That's the part where we know that we're having another parabolic extension. Maybe someone does remember me talking about what parabolas do. I think it was around, I think price was around 14, 15, 16K. So if you want to look those videos back, you have a little bit of a reference. But generally, parabolic trends, they go steeper and steeper and steeper on the bottom. So you have a trend, yada yada yada, and then it starts following this one. But at the same time, you can draw a trend line on the top of it. And once you start breaking out of that top trend line, usually it will indicate a sharp rise, an acceleration, which eventually sees a big sell-off into, some kind of bottom trend line again. And then after that, it can, eventually either start breaking down, which at that moment should start worrying you about how the parabola is developing. And sometimes it just consolidates and does the whole same trick again. So you probably draw something like this, that, and then it comes back down up here, and it can repeat that a few times, but at some point, things are so vertical that it is not something you should be expecting to break up anymore. And if it does, at some point you will see what I was just talking about, something where it does break out of it, and people have been seeing those diagonal breakouts, and then they FOMO into it only to do like a mean reversion to the downside. I hope that makes sense. So if we go back to this chart, that what I was just drawing would be the case if we break this diagonal, and it would be a signal for another acceleration. And you got to be careful that we don't see a breakdown. But as long as it keeps flipping these horizontal levels and keeps holding them and keeps breaking out of these diagonal upper trend lines, it just is acceleration after acceleration. And longing into resistance right now is probably not the best idea. You should have been focused on getting along inside this range. And once you start breaking out of these diagonal trend lines, I think it's also a good idea to de-risk. Personally, I'd be, taking off my exposure to margin longs and more start trading in spot, but always keep some kind of like a moon bag, depending on also like where you expect this to go. But if this trend line, if this diagonal breaks to the upside, I do expect that we're gonna go here. So next couple of hours, days will be very decisive. It's no guarantee that we break out of this. I do expect that we're going to be breaking out of this. There is downside risk here, but I'm just going to let it run, and I'll be cutting short if price loses this trend line and this horizontal, right? ETH is having trouble. All right, police. Shit. All right, well, I'm going to be talking about ETH later. I'm going to run outside and see what's going on because there's cops running in my street. All right, take care, guys, and talk to you on Sunday.